I'm communicating with someone, so hang on for a second here. I think you're gonna like this because I was just talking to Tone about this. Um, this is a crazy story. This is absolutely a crazy story here. I got to tell you guys about it. Um, First and foremost, big sales. So this morning, as I'm hearing reports that the Eagles are going to sign and hire Vic Fangio as defensive coordinator of the Eagles, my high school coach, Joe Anzalone, texts me. I went to school in Connecticut at Stanford Catholic High School. I went to a prep school. Believe it or not. Hey, I know. Shocking, right? Big Sills went to a Catholic school. Well, I went to a Catholic school. I did. And my high school coach goes, hey, congratulations on your friend getting the DC job with the Eagles. I'm like, Vic Fangio? I don't know Vic Fangio. I just told Tone, you could have put me in an electric chair and electrocuted me, put me in a firing squad, and asked me to swear, have you ever met him? I would have said, no, I'd never met him. And he goes, well, don't you remember me driving you up to Milford Academy in the early 80s after you got out of high school? There was a issue about my grades. See, I had 1,100 on my SATs, but I had a 2.1 grade point average, and I had to pass a class to get into college. And at the end of the recruiting time back then, only a few schools saved a scholarship for me. SMU, who was going to go on probation, and I think BC, outside of Maryland. All the rest of them had to fill their scholarships. So I was going to go to potentially to a prep school called Milford Academy. And a lot of Penn State guys went to school there back in the day. Ton of Penn State guys, ton of Pitt guys. I think Chris Dolman went there. You know, the Hall of Fame defensive end for the NFL. And he went to school at the University of Pittsburgh. Anyway, so my high school coach goes like this, Sills, don't you remember who recruited you? I go, no. He goes, the guy you talked to was Vic Fangio. So my high school coach gave me his cell phone number. I text him. He goes, you don't remember me recruiting you? I congratulated him on becoming the defensive coordinator of the Eagles. And he's like, yeah, I recruited you out of Stanford Catholic to come play at Milford Academy. I held a scholarship for you. And I think he went to North Carolina after that. I only think he stayed there 1 year. Okay? How crazy is that story? You know, it's funny. I was just telling Tone, you know, through playing and being in broadcasting, it's crazy the amount of people you forget, you know, you've had interaction with. So Vic Fangio getting the job. You know, the most important thing about him getting that job is that he's going to be at least in control of that side of the football. You guys may not like the scheme, but what's going to be the difference from a year ago, here's a guy that's going to have autonomy in how he's going to run his defense. Now, obviously, there'll be interference from the front office and from management, but still, you're going to get coaches, I think, in the building this time, because we're going to talk about that press conference and my takeaways from that press conference. That there's no question. One thing came out of that interview or presser or fireside chat was that Nick Sirianni was neutered. He has no power. He is more of a department head now. He has no say in anything. That was made abundantly clear because I went back and watched that press conference twice. It was easily one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen. And you had 8 days for that, and you put that out there for people to chomp on? 8 days you had. And that's what you went out and how you presented yourself. Really? 8 days, and you gave people that. People could say anything they want about his style of coaching, but It fits today's NFL. 34 defense, 2 safeties over the top, fast LBs. They need to get LBs or it won't work. Correct. And what you heard from Howie Roseman, I'm not very sure they're going to tool the right thing here, Christopher. I'm not sure they're going to. Okay? I'm just not sure. But there's no question that press conference, before I get in, I have my takeaways here. By the way, Angelo Cataldi will be with us at 4:30. Randy Cross will break down the NFC Championship game, the owner of 3 Super Bowls for CBS Sports. He played with the Niners, actually, and Joe Montana. We'll get his thoughts. Lions and 49ers. Tomorrow we'll do something with Chiefs and Ravens. Kadri Ishmael will join us tomorrow. So we'll break the AFC down tomorrow as we get ready for the conference title games this weekend. And we're going to get into our takeaways here. But that press conference, me listening, it was a bunch of deflecting. It was just deflecting. And not self-accountability. When it came to the person, you get this. Do you know what I took away from Howie? Howie's not taking any blame for anything when it comes to the personnel decisions that he's made. You know, he did say something about the underachieving defensive line. Okay, so that was probably, but get this, he gave more credit to the linebacking core than he did to the defensive line. And I was like, dude, okay, your defensive line didn't have a great year, but your linebackers were horrific all year. And you gave them more love in that press conference than you did the guys who were actually showing up at hey, they played at least 13 good games, 12 good games. That linebacking core never played any good games. Talking to me about guys who are not good. It didn't make sense. It just did not make sense. So let's get to the takeaways. You know, first off, wait, before I do that, what was the purpose of that press conference yesterday? What was the purpose of it? What did you accomplish? Knowing your position? We don't need to know that. Telling us what kind of went wrong? We don't need to know that. They talk too much. The entire organization talks too much. They don't owe you an explanation on winning 11 games and winning 25 games in the last 2 years. They don't owe you anything. They really don't owe you anything. Why do they feel the need to over-explain themselves on what went wrong? It's like you're more accountable to the media or letting the media know than you are to your own players. It's really ass backwards. It was just bullshit, that whole thing. Get this. Really, so no disrespect, and I'm just using Jeff McClain's name. So I owe Jeff McClain an excuse on why we went 1-6 down the stretch, and I don't owe more of an accountability and conversation with my own players. Hey, no disrespect to the media guys. Fuck them. I don't owe you anything. You don't owe me anything. I didn't get the purpose of the press conference. I just didn't get it. It was not necessary. And by the way, why didn't you do one at a time? Why didn't Howie do one? Why did you have to do it together? It's like a babysitter. I got it, Nick. Hey, dude, Bill Belichick doesn't do press conferences with assistant general managers. The guys who are in charge don't have a guy sitting next to them. They get up there in front and they sit there themselves and they answer questions about their football team. It's just really, there's too many voices. Just too many voices. It just doesn't make sense. I didn't get the purpose of the meeting and the press conference. And then for you to have 8 days and give you that shit, that was terrible. Hey, I learned more about your incompetence than I learned more about your competence. Is that fair? He made it halfway through the season and realized he messed up huge and spent the rest of the season trying to fill the linebacker position. Yeah, because Dean shit the bed. He was never going to do it. I said it from day one when they named him the starter. And they're naming him the starter again. I'll make it again. This is an easy prediction. He will not play the full season again. He will start the season and be on IR again by week 2, and he will underachieve. He's not good enough. Shit, before he got hurt, he didn't play well and they were targeting him. Dean is a bust. You got to come to grips with it. Have you seen one redeeming quality about that kid outside of him being a good dude? Let me get to this takeaway now. Again, I didn't get the press conference. I didn't get the whole thing. Kobe Dean's a bust. Hey, watch this. Sorry, guys. In my book, Nakobe Dean's a bust until proven otherwise. Here's another one. Until proven otherwise, Jordan Davis is a 2-down DT. Until proven otherwise. And get this. How many of you guys were waffling on that bullshit? You owe him an apology, Sills. You owe Jordan Davis an apology. I said, I don't owe that kid nothing. It's a long season. Let's see how it plays out. Sure enough, he went back to being who he was. Right? Hey, there's one thing I do like LJ. LJ goes like this. If Nakobe's a bust, what was your career? A bust. Yes. Take it from me. Yes. You got me. I know when I could spot one. Bust. Absolutely. Let's do the takeaways. Okay? Truth. Justice. The Big Sills way. That's what we do here. 8 days for that bullshit press conference. Okay? Hey, that's funny. Hey, that's a great one. I played in more NFL football games than Nakobe Dean did. That's still a fact. Who would have thunk that? I've had more tackles in one. No, I think Jordan had more this year. Yeah. I had more tackles in a season than Nakobe Dean. And I've actually played in more games than Nakobe Dean. Let's go to the takeaways. Brian Johnson. Here's Nick. He's a great coach. We just need a new direction. What? He's really a great coach, had a lot to do with the success here. But we just need new voices in the building. Come again? Do you like him or not? Was he a good? So he was a great coach. You fired a great coach in your eyes. You meant to say, we fired a great person. They're so uncomfortable in front of a microphone. Both those guys. They're so uncomfortable. Brian Johnson's a great coach. I was like, why did you feel that you had to? What's that stuff called when you do this? That you felt that you had to give like a reach around on why you fired Brian Johnson. Okay, he's a great coach. See, Sills, that's why you're My Bob Lang, if I own the Eagles. How you doing? Cute. Thank you, my friend. He's a great coach. I was like, okay. There's a first lie. Let's see how many lies we got here. Nick, we're changing some directions in our offensive scheme. Wait a minute. What direction is that? Actually trying to get guys open? Going back to the RPO? Why didn't anybody follow up on that? Like what? You wanted to get back to the 22 offense? Or are you looking to expand the 22 offense? Because don't bring back that 23 offense. I mean, we're looking for new ideas. Well, what ideas didn't you have in 23? Everyone had a career year. New direction? So Jalen's going to get another coordinator with a new direction for the 8th time in 9 years from his time playing college and pro ball. Sounds like you got this thing going. Nick, the offense got stale. You know what that's code for? It didn't evolve under Nick. How's that guy have a job? How does that guy have a job when he says his offense did not evolve? Now you know why your quarterback had to step back. The head coach didn't evolve. The offense didn't evolve. You had the same playbook and the same players. Don't you ask yourself that question? I was listening to Sports Take earlier. You guys know I like the show. And they had a guy on from Delaware, was it? And you know what they were saying? Well, there's a lot of talent on offense. Shit, it's the same talent you had in 22 that you had in 23. And Swift gave you another dynamic. Why did you suck? What was the problem? Direction? What staleness when everyone had a career year? What was so stale about it? Winning games? See, Shane wanted to win games. Nick and Brian wanted to put offensive numbers up and big numbers up. And by the way, is that not a philosophical mentality that the owner wants? Didn't this year's coaching staff, especially on offense, give Jeffrey Lurie what he wanted? Yes or no? Isn't that what Jeffrey Lurie wants? Big play, big numbers, high scoring. Isn't that the argument they had with Doug? They delivered that. Everybody across the board had career years. Aren't you seeing this? How did it get stale, Nick? How did it get? That's a lie. How can an offense be stale when you were more productive this year? Your quarterback had 40 touchdowns. How are you stale? Nick Sirianni has this job. You know why? Because he did what Leonidas wouldn't do. He took a knee. He is the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles because that guy took a knee. Whatever you guys want. You want to hire your own coaches? Fine. You want to hire your own staff? Fine. Because you know what, Nick? That's how you got the job in the first place. This press conference was comical. Every player that's at the NovaCare Center right now must have watched that thing and went, Jesus criminy. They're embarrassing Nick Sirianni right in front of your eyes. Most people wouldn't know it, though. Dude, let me tell you what happened. Howie put his Pope ring out, and Nick kissed it. How about this question? This has to be the most embarrassing question I've ever heard a coach with a 667 win. Get this. You have a 667 win percentage. Let me set this up properly. You have a 667 win percentage. You've made the playoffs 3 years in a row. Your quarterback just got a $250 million contract. You've had, in the last 2 years, 2 coaches get head coaching jobs that were on your staff. How can you be asked this question? What's your job, Nick? That has to be the most embarrassing question I've ever heard. Asked to an NFL head coach, what's your job? We may have a neutered coach, but I just want to take a second to say Dallas stinks. Back to the programming. Philly 500, I love you. That makes everyone's heart feel good too. How many guys with a 667 win percentage have been asked the question, what's your job? What do you do? What is your job title? Well, I bring coffee into the defensive meetings, offensive meetings, special teams meetings, and I kind of like oversee. And you know what I do? I put a spreadsheet together. That's what I heard. This guy makes spreadsheets, checks on his departments, and then goes to his office. That's his job? Oh, man. What's your job, Nick? What's your job? See, when you got guys like John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, some of these other guys that are managers, they're not asked those questions. Mike Tomlin's not asked what your job is. Those other guys are not asked a question. What's your job? What's your job? What do you do here? It has to be the most embarrassing question I've ever heard an NFL head coach asked in my life. What's your job? Here. Howie. We have a lot of great players and a lot of young great players on our defensive side of the ball. Who? Who's young and great? Jalen Carter? Josh Sweat? Who else? Milton Williams? Who else? Who else would you consider great young talent on your defensive side of the ball? This came out of this guy's mouth. He's got, and he feels they have young, great talent on defense. He did, Flexen. He called Nakobe Dean great. You're I mean, not one of the draft picks showed any promise outside of Carter. I thought Sidney Brown was average. I thought Ringo was average. Look at the numbers. You were terrible in pass coverage. You were terrible across the board. Scheme, overrunning plays, no pursuit angles. Ray Lewis was laughing at you in that Buck game and your pursuit angles. Do you know how to run to the ball? Do you even practice that? Do you practice anything? This guy was telling you at that press conference, I watched it twice. that he has great young talent. Your core guys on defense are Josh Sweat, Jalen Carter, and that's it. The rest of those guys have a long way to go. 2 out of 11. And your backups are dog shit. Wait, Milton Williams. I'll take that back. I like Milton. Milton should be starting over Jordan Davis. Milton Williams should be starting over Jordan Davis, but Howie would never let that happen. You're going to start the season with Nakobe Dean as your starting linebacker. You're going to have the same shit you had last year. I don't care if you bring in Bud Carson. I don't care if you bring in Bill Belichick to fix that defense. When you don't have the Jimmies and Joes, you can't do anything. You could have the greatest scheme on the planet. When you got trash can linebackers, then you got players that can't play anymore at the corner position. I don't care what you think you can do. Can you fix it? Give me some Jimmies and Joes. Howie, I have a lot of belief in Nakobe Dean. I think he's a great player. Where did you get that from? When he played against Vanderbilt? Where in the world can you, how about this? I'll take anything here. Give me one moment where you saw he was good. Zach Cunningham, Howie, had a great year. You had 8 days for this. How do you sit there and listen to this if you're a media guy too, knowing full well none of this is true? I thought I was at a Biden press conference. Or for that matter, a Trump press conference. None of these guys were like politicians. None of this shit's true. Howie, it was Nick's call to fire Desai. So let me get this right. Nick said the offense got stale, which means it didn't evolve. And he decided to fire Desai, if we believe that, and I don't, but he said it. Big Seals, why, oh why, no reporters asked two dudes, why did the players told us the demotion of Desai came from you guys? Which one is it? They deflected that question. They didn't want to answer it. They didn't want to answer it. Okay? Nick goes like this, or how he goes, yeah, that was Nick's call. So how did he explain to you that elevating Matt Patricia was Nick second guessing Desai? That falls on me. No shit. That's why coaches get fired. So the offense got stale under you. You made a poor decision on the defensive side of the football. Your in-game situational play calling blew out loud. Your quarterback regressed, and he kept his job. Kiss the ring, Nick. You got an ass kisser for a coach. I don't either, Philly 500. I do not believe it either. That whole press conference was a lie. Did the Eagles let Vic know they have no cap space? Hey, by the way, The Dolphins are going to file tampering charges against Philadelphia Eagles. My boy Armando says, hey, and by the way, just because they may have wanted to fire him, he was still under contract when they contacted him. That's tampering. Whether they were going to blow him out or not, he was still under contract with the Dolphins when they mutually parted ways. And now that the Dolphins know he had a job in waiting, that job in waiting, that wasn't just something that was made up in 10 seconds of a phone call after they parted ways. That was negotiated. They're going to owe draft choices to the Dolphins. That's tampering. When a coordinator is under contract, whether you're going to fire him or not, as long as he's still under contract, and if you're negotiating prior to that, that's tampering. Ask the Cardinals and Eagles. Get this. This time the Eagles are going to make sure they get their guy. So he mutually parts ways. The next day he has a contract all ironed out for a 3-year contract with the Philadelphia Eagles to become the defensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. And that wasn't negotiated, but it was negotiated in 2 minutes. Okay. Now, you'll believe that. Tampering. He was under contract with the Miami Dolphins. Any way you want to look at it. Howie, we need to make sure we're moving forward in a positive direction, that we're all working together. I don't know what that means. How about this? Duh. Nick. How about this one? This question was kind of, I'll give the media in Philly a little bit of love here, because you know what they did? They wouldn't get off the gas pedal on this. Do you know the media had to ask this question 3 times? 3 times they had to ask this question. Nick, Hurts and Brian Johnson and the new coordinator, what's the involvement? This guy went on some sort of like 3-minute soliloquy. Well, you know, we're going to do this, do that, and I'm like, he said nothing. It was like watching Charlie Brown. And I was like, I got nothing out of that. Nick, Hurts and Brian Johnson, asked 3 times. Finally. Well, you'll have to ask Jalen. You were asked the question 3 times. You danced around it. You never answered it. Classic shit here, man. 8 days for this. Hey, they were as prepared for this press conference as they were for their season this year. By the way, hey, the content is amazing. All you have to do is just listen to the bullshit. This ain't me talking. This is them. I wrote it down. Look. This is not me. I'm not making this shit up. Go back and listen. Nick Sirianni, I have to reprove myself. So the offense didn't evolve. I made a poor decision on Desai and Patricia. My in-game situational play calling sucked, and I have to reprove myself. And you're a 667 coach with a winning percentage, and you've been to playoffs 3 years in a row, and you have to reprove yourself. Jesus, man. Holy cow, this is just a really, I don't know what the hell to say to this thing. This thing was a disgrace. They did it. I mean, I'm not sure why they did this to themselves. What was the point of this? Get this. I'm just pointing shit out here. I'm not really, I'm pointing, get this, right, Tone? I'm pointing stuff they said and answered. I'm not adding it. This is stuff this is how they answered these questions. Like, I'm not adding a spin. I wrote their answers down. I put Nick, Howie. Here's Nick on Hurts getting better. His work ethic will right the ship. That's maybe one of the best lines that was in that press conference, and one I believe. I think there's only one guy in that building that can fix things. It's him. He'll fix him. Will Nick fix him? How about this? Let me rephrase that. Jalen Hurts will fix himself. Will Nick Sirianni fix himself? I'm going to make a point to you here. Jalen Hurts is outgrown Nick Sirianni. He's not qualified to be a coach for Jalen Hurts. Jalen needs a more qualified coach, and I mean a more qualified head coach. Fuck the coordinator. He needs a more quality leader around him. He's used to Nick Saban. He's used to people like that, Lincoln Riley and those kind of folks, not a puppet who kisses rings and lies all day. He needs a better leader, dude. Most of these people have no clue how well you could come off a block and wreck the football. Love the honesty, brother. Thank you very much. It's all good, man. Nick Sirianni is not good enough as a head coach for Jalen Hurts. And you know what people are saying now? How can you have a win percentage like that? Because you got great players and horrible leadership. That's what they have they have in Dallas, kind of what you have in Philly. Really good players, not the strongest NFC. They're going to win a lot of games, but when the games matter, you're not going to win them. Because to win superstar games, you've got to have the Andy Reids. You've got to have the superstar coaches like John Harbaugh. You've got to have guys like that to get you through the finish line. Never invest in the horse. Always invest in the jockey. That's Warren Buffett. If you don't have the proper jockey, no matter how talented your horse is, he ain't going to find the finish line. And that's kind of what you got here. Nick Sirianni can't find the finish line. He couldn't find the finish line when you were 1-6. He didn't know how to turn it around. Trying to figure out the Eagles is borderline insanity. It is. Dude, Howie Roseman was just as much of a bullshit artist as Nick was. That whole press conference was just a bunch of bullshit. No wonder the players in the locker room looked at everyone and went, who's the leader? Guys, I'm not telling you, I'm adding some of my opinion on this. But if you just listen to their answers, how about this? How frustrated were you after that press conference? How frustrated were you when you listened to it? You went, shit, man. They told us more than I thought they would, but the other way. I didn't come out of that thing feeling better. I came out of that thing feeling worse. That's why I predicted you're going to be a 5-win team in 2 years. Howie was asked the question, why'd you bring Nick back? It's kind of like a low-key question. We brought him back because we have confidence in him. If you have confidence in him, then why'd you fire his DC? Why'd you hire a babysitter in Desai? Why did you hire 2 coordinators that had no experience? Did you maybe overestimate? Could this be a possibility? Think about this, guys. Maybe they overrated. Hey, can players be overrated? Can players be overrated? Do you think a football player can be? Is Micah Parsons overrated? How many people in here think Micah Parsons is overrated? I do. I think Micah Parsons is overrated. Do you think Micah Parsons is overrated? Do you think he is? Okay, compared to like when you see a Myles Garrett or a TJ Watt, players can be, and so yes. Well, why can't a 667 coach that's made the playoffs 3 years in a row be overrated? It works both ways. Nick Sirianni's overrated. He's Micah Parsons of coaching. He's overrated. Players can be overrated. Why couldn't this guy be overrated? They're hiding behind the record. They're hiding behind the playoff run. Howie, you put good players on the roster. That's evident. Look at the offense. You got 5 Pro Bowlers over there. And should have been 6 with the quarterback. 6 of the 11 players you should have as Pro Bowlers. Your coach is overrated, dude. Hey, how about this? Maybe that's really an indictment on the entire 2023 season. The entire team was overrated. Can that be? Can that 2023 team be overrated? Remember a couple of years ago when the Cardinals got out to a great, what was it? Like 11-0 start or 10-0? Steelers too a couple of years ago, like 3 years ago. They got out to some crazy start and everyone went, that team's overrated. They're not going to be a great team at the end. It was like Roethlisberger's last year, I think. Team was overrated. Get this. How many people in here think that Nick Sirianni's overrated? Remember this. You went through the same process that you went through with Doug. Howie almost said that verbatim. Remember what was the famous line they were using in that press conference? Business as usual. Business as usual. Business as usual. That's what this was. It was business as usual. You fired Doug Peterson, who won a Super Bowl, who lost 11 games. And you had the same coach who's a 667 win percentage guy, who's been to the playoffs 3 years in a row. Can I tell you this? If that was Doug Peterson, who had won 11 games and had been putting these teams in playoffs year after year, he'd get a contract extension after this year, even with the 1-6 finish. Why? He has the equity of the Super Bowl. Howie does. If Howie gets the equity of the Super Bowl, so would Doug. Do you understand that's why Doug, the importance of firing Doug? Because Doug had equity that Howie had. Howie can survive a 1-6 finish because he has the equity in the Super Bowl. He brought it up because we've done it before. Remember what I told you, Tone? Don't ever bury your assets early in a press conference or in an interview. Wait to the middle or the end. Howie brought 17 up middle towards the end. Why? Because we've done it. He was smart to do that. Because he went to his equity. His equity is 17. You see, Doug had equity of 17. There's nobody in that building that has that equity but him. Don't you understand that? Nobody in that building has the equity of the 2017 Super Bowl, but your general manager. So he can survive being 1-6 down the stretch. Nick can't. Nick can't survive that. That's why he's got to reprove himself. You know, this guy pulls his aces out when he needs it. 17 will always be his number one ace. Because when someone goes, how did we know you can do it? Well, we did it in 17. There's the card. Look at this. Steve goes, we all know that, Sills. I don't think you do. Because why would a guy with a 667 win percentage be on the firing block? I don't think you do. You could make the argument that Nick Sirianni has had some of the most success of any coach in the history of the Eagles. And you almost fired him? I like that Philly 500. That's a good one there. Hey, Hollywood, we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Let me finish my takeaways from that fireside chat you guys had yesterday. Howie, the cupboard's not bare. The cupboard's not bare. You have no coordinators worth of shit. You have no defensive football players worth of shit, except for 3. And the cupboard's not bare. And then you know what people like to do? They'll dissect and go, well, the offense is good. Really? How'd that offense look this year in the second half of the season with all those talented guys? Good or bad? What happened then? If you have, and you're comfortable with all those players that you have on that side of the ball, and you couldn't make the playoffs, what's your excuse? Coaching? Personnel? I want to make a point to you here, Dan, to Howie Roseman. This is fantasy football as long as he's involved with football. Think about something here. Howie Roseman says that the cabinet and the cupboard isn't bare. You know why he says that? Remember what I told you yesterday when I asked Jeff Ireland a question? I asked Jeff Ireland a question when I was doing radio in Miami, and he was the general manager of the Dolphins. And I asked him to give me a grade of what he thought his roster was, and he gave me B's. And I said, and I fired back at Jeff, and I said, you've had 2 straight years of 6-10. And you give yourself a B for the roster, so it must be coaching then that sucks. No. Then he had to walk it back because he knew he stepped into a trap. You know what Howie's saying here? The cupboard's not bare. So it's coaching. He thinks it's coaching. The owner thinks it's coaching. He told you that with that one comment, that the cupboard's not bare. You can't just, you see, in the NFL, you can't talk about one side of the ball. You can't dissect that. You either have a great roster or you don't. 22 was a great roster. 23 is an unbalanced roster and an unbalanced salary cap. Why? Because you paid your quarterback. Howie robbed the defense, cut the team in half, hired people that weren't qualified, and that's why you're – how about this? What would you give the grade of that football team? Here, let's do this. What grade would you give that football team the last 7 games of the season? What grade would you give your team? 11 wins? You're overrated. What would you give your grade to the last 7 weeks of the season? A C for one? Henry thinks it's a C, and you were 1-6. Sorry, Henry, that's not average. C is average. You didn't have an average record. You were killed by quarterbacks who are journeymen. That was an F. Overhyped. How about this? Don't you think that your season also was a microcosm of Jordan Davis? Really good. Second half, F. AF. Eagles, AF. How? League caught up with you. League realized who you were. You weren't the 22 Eagles. Okay? You were overhyped. You know who I thought really kind of showed you who you were? I think it was still Washington. I know some of you think it's the Niners. I think it was Washington that started showing you a little bit about your weaknesses and who you are and where to attack. I kept saying it the whole year. Remember, even when I was talking about New England, I kept saying, man, if they just attack those tight ends with those linebackers that the Eagles have, they'll win those things every day. All of a sudden, teams started figuring out you couldn't cover tight ends. And you got a general manager that's walking around in a press conference telling you that he thinks that his linebackers played great this year, and one guy's got a great, bright future who can't stay on the field. I don't know how you justify that comment and not get crushed in it. I didn't see any comments made by the Inquirer, too, ripping that thing to shreds that he thinks that his linebacking core is a good one with a promising future, Mike Backer. That's what he said. Tell me I'm wrong. He thinks Dean's great and has a great future ahead of him, and that Zach Cunningham had a great year. He raved more about the linebacker play. And by the way, Howie, you didn't draft Zach Cunningham. You found him at the Milk Dud store. I mean, he's taking credit for Zach Cunningham? Jesus. Zach Cunningham is a borderline NFLer now. Nick, position coaches are in trouble. Okay, we're still evaluating that. He didn't say trouble. I added that. He said we're still evaluating the position coaches. And what did I tell you? Remember that point I brought up to you? You had 24 coaches last year. You made 12 changes by elevating players into new positions. I told you that'd be catastrophic, and it was. Think about what I said to you. I added up 12 new coaches that were elevated into new positions from the 22 season. There lies the majority of your problem. You didn't just have inexperience at your coordinating position. You had inexperience across the board. Do you know why they're going after veteran coaches now? Because those veteran coaches are going to bring in, especially what I heard with Nick today, saying that no coaches in the building are safe. Those coaches are going to bring their own people in. That's why they're going for experience. They're not just going for they're not just, here. You're not hiring Vic Fangio for the 34 defense. You're hiring Nick Fangio to bring you a DB coach, a linebacker coach, a D-line coach, an edge rushing coach, a safety coach. That's what you're hiring him for. See, people look at it in the macro. Those coordinators are going to bring in quality wide receiver coaches. I don't think you need to change the wide receiver coach because the last 3 years, that position has done well with two people. Now, that's a philosophical way about how you're attacking teams. So I don't know if that's a wide receiving coach's job to sit there and go, well, if you can't spread the ball out, that's not my guy's fault. You get nothing out of a WR3. When you hire Frank, see, you know what's crazy? How many times did I give you guys names of people that could be like Leslie Frazier or a Frank Reich or a Canales who just got hired by the Panthers? Those guys are not just being hired because they're coordinators. They're hired if they're given the autonomy to bring their people in and to execute their game plan and to execute their 43 or 34. You can't go into what you did. Here's what the Eagles tried to do last year. Hire Sean Desai and Brian Johnson had no chance of success. You know why? They were coordinators from someone else's offense. Brian Johnson was the offensive coordinator for Shane Steichen's offense. Brian Johnson was the offensive coordinator for Shane Steichen's offense. And Sean Desai was the defensive coordinator for Jonathan Gannon's defense. And they asked him to coordinate. Then on top of that, offensively with Brian Johnson, you had Nick's influence. So did Brian Johnson really have a chance of succeeding? Absolutely not. It was two different guys' offenses, and he was given the plays to run. Come on, man. That's not a coordinator. That's a do guy. Hey, do what we tell you. Personally, I think you did those guys wrong because you never really found out if they were quality coaches or not. You coached the coaches. Think of that. They didn't coach the players. They coached the coaches. You can't win like that. Eagles let John Harbaugh walk out the door. Tell me that's not what they did. They did more coaching on the coaches than they did the players. I don't want to hire a coach and have to coach him. I want him to do his job. But see, again, control, Lombardi Trophy. What's more important? Okay? John Harbaugh was a special teams guy. DB coach. We're supposed to fire Andy to promote him. I don't think you get anything wrong when you hire Harbaugh, do you? John Harbaugh could be a head coach at Tadpoles, and I'd hire him. Jim Harbaugh could be the head coach of Frogs. I'll hire him. He could run a zoo. I'll hire him. You're not going to go wrong when it comes to hiring a Harbaugh. Nick. Offense, we have to meet with the players. We have to get the players back on the same page again as we did. I'm not sure what that means. Their comments on Jalen Hurts, asking if Jalen is involved. By the way, just so you know, Todd Monken, John Harbaugh didn't ask Lamar Jackson whether or not he liked Todd Monken as a candidate. He had no say in that hire. That's leadership. And get this, that's Lamar trusting him. Think about that for a minute. Okay? Lamar didn't question or was asked about Todd Monken being hired. When Lamar was told that Todd Monken's going to be the offensive coordinator, he goes, hey, I can't wait to meet. I can't wait to talk. Baltimore always does a great job of putting proper people around everyone. I'm looking forward to going into the 23 season. That's how it was presented, and that's how it was addressed. He was never asked his opinion. What do you think of Todd Monken? And I'm not asking Jalen Hurts' opinion. Okay? If I'm asking the player's opinion, that means I don't know what I'm doing. What's your job, Nick? What's your job, Howie? Your job is to put the proper personnel on the roster and coaches in position to win. Those are your fundamental things that you are hired to do. If you are turning around and asking Nobody's asking Joe Burrow about coordinators or Kyle Shanahan going to Brock Purdy about quarterback coaches. Kyle Shanahan's making that call. This is in the best interest for you. I'm going to put you in the best position to succeed. And you know what that does? You think Josh Allen was told or asked about Joe Brady being elevated? They fired Ken Dorsey. The next day, Allen said, this is my fault, elevated Joe Brady because that was Sean McDermott's call. This is in the best interest for you. And it was. Problem solver. That's what coaches do. And do you know what that does when you do that? You build equity up with your player because then the player goes like this. Holy shit, they are doing right by me. You got to ask guys questions and you got to give 50 different opinions. You don't have any leadership in your room. Football players want to be coached. They want to feel that you're putting them in a position to win. They don't want to know what kind of chaos is going on. So that notion that Jalen Hurts has to be involved in who his coordinator is, not me. Because if that's the case, your management team is running your organization again. And my question mark on Jalen moving forward and getting better will still be there. And you're going to rely more on him to get this right, and he'll have more shitty coaching around him. I would say this. In 8 of the 9 years that he's had all these coordinators, half of them guys sucked. So there's a 50-50 chance he gets a guy that's going to help him. A coach has to have something to bring to the table. Who's the best guy for Hurts? This is what you talk to your player about when you're Jalen. We want to look at a guy and you give him a profile. You don't give him a name. You give him a profile of what you're looking for. Because that's why they're interviewing 100 guys. I heard some people going like this, Kellen Moore sucks. Kellen Moore may be the right choice for Jalen. You don't know that. I don't know that. Was he right for Herbert? Nope. Was he right for Dak? Kind of, but not really. You know, these coordinators, sometimes they fit, sometimes they don't fit. Nathaniel Hackett works with Aaron Rodgers. Nathaniel Hackett doesn't work with anyone else. North Turner worked with Troy Aikman. Doesn't really work with anyone else. That all goes hand in hand. It's not a simple hire. Who's the wide receiver coach? Who's the running back coach? Are you going to retain Jeff Stoutland? Probably. I hope you do. No ex-Cowboys. I don't give a shit where this guy coached. I care about getting Hurts right. Whatever that looks like. Dude, this stuff with putting tags on people because they were here or there is idiotic. You're looking for the most qualified person you can possibly have. Okay? I want the best coach to be put in the best position, to be given the most autonomy he can possibly have to help that kid elevate his game. Nothing else. I don't care what he looks like. I don't care what his resume is. I want to know what he's going to do for that kid. Okay? Well, this guy played here. This guy, who fucking cares? Okay? Who cares? That's like doing this. Check it out. Here. Emmitt Smith in his prime. Eagle guys wouldn't want Emmitt Smith as a running back on their team because he's a Cowboy. I mean, do you play with dolls and shit? Do you make sandcastles? I mean, do you have a Slurpee machine at home? I'm like, what are you talking about? Takeaway, final takeaway here. Nick has this job because he kissed the ring. Plain and simple. He bent over. And he kissed the ring. Hey, Nick, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. If you're not happy with it. That's what Nick said. I have to reprove myself because you know what that meant? They told him and read him the riot act in that meeting. Hey, man, this fell apart more so than what we thought. And you know what I think they have? I don't think they have buyer's remorse about Nick. I think they lost some faith in him. Because when a head coach has to say, I have to reprove myself with a 667 win percentage and 3 straight playoff runs, you know he was read the riot act. Saints interview 49ers, Clint Kubiak, Brian Griese, and meanwhile, I got it. I mean, dude, you got to, dude, that press conference led me to believe that there's total non-belief that it was player. They don't believe the player. Get this. They don't believe that the players on the roster were the issues at the end of the year. They believed it was the coordinators and new ideas were needed in a stale offense. They blame Nick. Howie and the owner aren't blaming them. Once again, they're staying the course and their egos. That's what I took away. You had 8 days. And, you know, I heard, no disrespect, Tone, but I heard that guy that was on, they were humbled. They were lying. They were bullshit artists. Hey, you can humble yourself in front of the media because that's what the media wants to see. That was a production. They put a show on. There was nothing truthful about the answers or the presentation of it. And if you buy that, that's on you, man. Sorry. I don't subscribe to that kind of shit. Because I'm a result-driven dude. Either you're winning or you're losing. You don't have to show contrition to me. I don't give a shit about contrition. I don't care about sorries and press conferences on Wednesdays. I don't care about you making lies up and then turning around lying again about the lie. I care about you winning. And get this. To hear some media people say that Nick and Howie were humbled, you'll believe anything. I mean, who gives a shit if they're humbled? What does being humbled have to do with anything? They're paid $6 to $8 million to coach the team. I'm sure Howie's in the $3.5 million area for being a GM. I don't give a shit if you're humbled. Didn't you feel that those guys were contrite? That's like being asked, Nick, how you feeling? Is everything in the weight of the world on your show? I don't care. You didn't care when you fired Desai twice. But I'm supposed to care about that bullshit comment and that bullshit press conference like that? Man, I can't believe how you people fall for that shit. That was a train wreck of a press conference. There was not one redeeming thing about that press conference that was truthful. Kobe Dean's great. Zach Cunningham's great. Our cupboard is not bare. We got a lot of young, great, talented players on defense. What's he talking about? What is he talking about? What was he talking about? And again, what was the purpose of the fireside chat? It was to bullshit you. Hey, how about this? What did you take away positive? Hey, I'll tell you what I'll do. What was the positive thing that you took away from this thing they did yesterday? What was the positive thing that you took away from it? And you know what? If there was, maybe I missed it. What was the positive thing you took away? What was one positive thing? I'll go, you're right. I missed that. That Nick is giving up all of his offense. Again, then what's your job? How's that positive when your coach has no job? Nick Sirianni doesn't have a job. He has no responsibilities. What coach in the league has no responsibilities? He has none. He won't make any of the position hires. That's going to be left to the coordinators. His offense is not going to be anywhere involved in the new coordinator or on defense. What is his responsibility? Look at some people in here comparing Nick Sirianni to Mike Tomlin. Really? In an organization that's had 3 coaches in 60 years, they let their coaches coach. He's the boss. Nick has no power. Mike Tomlin is being compared to by some idiots in here to Nick Sirianni. That's a disgrace. Nick Sirianni couldn't clean Mike Tomlin's shoes. How many times did we have Kevin Colbert on this program? 3. He's former general manager of the Steelers. And I happen to know Kevin Colbert 35 years. He was with me in Detroit. And we've been friends a ton. Remember what he used to say when he came on here and how he ran the Steelers front office? He was the senior vice president and general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you know what he would do? Mike Tomlin would walk into his office in the offseason and say, this is what I need. This is what I want. Go find them. And in the offseason, he would go find those players. Didn't know what they looked like. He would go around and look. Mike would bring in the names of assistant coaches he wanted to bring in, and he would. The organization would look at it with the Rooneys. Sure, Mike, whatever you need. And Mike Tomlin here's the difference between Mike Tomlin and Nick Sirianni. And for you guys to compare that, get this. Think about this. Mike Tomlin would go in and go, I want Alfredo Roberts, Carl Dunbar. I want Dunbar to be my D-line coach, and I want Alfredo Roberts to be my tight end coach. You know how I know this? They were teammates of mine, and I know how they were hired. So Mike goes to the general manager of the team, and at the time it was Kevin Colbert, and he goes, okay, if you want these guys, no problem, coach. He goes to the Rooneys. Rooney sign off on it. Sure enough, Mike gets his guys. Mike's never been told no. That's why Mike didn't want to fire Canada, because that was his hire. Hey, I need these type of players. He never asked for a particular player, like a Joey Porter Jr. He wants this type of player. They know the makeup. I need a linebacker, I need a corner, and I need a safety. By the way, he was right on Porter Jr. He was right on Porter Jr. He goes, I want that kid. And sure enough, they went and they drafted him. And that's how Mike Tomlin runs. Nick Sirianni has none of that power. He ain't asking for assistant coaches. He ain't asking for personnel. And then you know what they do in the offseason? I see you, pretty dime. Agreed. You know what they do? And what did he tell you on this program? And once the season starts, I don't do interviews. I'm not seen publicly. I stay out of the way. That's coach's time too. Coach needs all his attention on his team. They don't get in the way. Mike Tomlin's not sitting up there with the general manager of the Steelers. That's the difference between the Steelers and the Eagles. Mike Tomlin runs his team. Same with John Harbaugh. John does all that too with Biscotti and Eric DeCosta. I want this assistant coach. Todd Monken was hired by John Harbaugh, not Eric DeCosta. Not by the owner. Those guys are coaches. You're missing the point. You guys are trying to compare a CEO style of coaching. They are the same style. They're just not the same guy. I mean, comparing people to people who have the power to do what they want. And you see, here's the difference in Baltimore and Pittsburgh. They control their own destiny. Nick doesn't. Because no matter how good he does, he can win a ton of games. And if they don't like the way it looks, they'll fire him. Comparing Nick Sirianni to Mike Tomlin. Yeah, or John Harbaugh. You shouldn't go there. There's no comparison. Only in the kind of style that you're talking about. Mike Tomlin's a coach. Nick Sirianni's a lapdog. You saw it at the press conference. By the way, our guy Tone's going to join us at 3:30. Angelo Cataldi will join us at 4:30. Randy Cross, the owner of 3 Super Bowl rings, will join us at 5:30 Eastern time. And we'll talk NFC Championship game with him and get his take on it. Mike Tomlin and Nick Sirianni. You can't be any dumber. Hey, don't forget the 2024 season is here. And during this time, the calendars are out for our great friends at Hooters. 9 of the girls featured in those calendars. $1 this weekend when it came to the divisional games. On Sunday, $1 off. I mean, you're going to be able to have yourself a great time. And I mean $1 off. It's going to go to local proceeds. $2 off actually on the purchase of each of these pitchers during the conference championship games on Sunday. Also, inside those calendars, $100 in coupons are there for you. All you have to do is purchase the calendars there. NortheastTutors.com. That's NortheastTutors.com. Lunch specials Monday through Friday, 11:30 to 3. Boneless wings. Happy hour Monday through Friday, 4 to 6. 6 items, $6. That's NortheastTutors.com. NortheastTutors.com. When you roll in, do me a favor. Tell them Big Sil sent you.
Football and Hooters, the perfect pair.